We're going to take a look right now at some of the vocab you're going to see pop up in the final reading of the class, the end of the chapter 15 passage. So just walking through this, we start off with tempto temptare. This is a first conjugation verb, o ara here, and this is to, the definition is gone, so it is to attempt or try. So attempt obviously comes from this. If you tempt someone, you're also testing them, trying them, seeing if you can convince them to do a thing that perhaps they might not want to do. So tempt, attempt all come from this. Then we get another one, dedo dedere. This is third conjugation, and this is to give up or surrender. The English words from this are not really going to be helpful, but what you're going to see in the reading is this is going to pair with a fun little pronoun that we aren't really getting the time to work with right now, the reflexive pronoun, which means himself here. So se dedere is to surrender oneself, to give up, basically. So you're going to see this pop up in the reading. Just translate this as surrender. You don't need to worry about translating the se bit. It will just go along with the verb. Then we get this verb, gero gerere, which is to carry, wage, all sorts of things. But this combines with the word bellum, a neuter noun, to mean to wage war. So our English word belligerent comes from this because if you're belligerent, you tend to get into fights. Well, it's kind of like you're waging war all the time. So you can also refer to the people waging war as the belligerents, the people who are fighting it, usually like countries. And so these are some fun words to know. Then we get one that is pretty clear in English. You have another third conjugation here, repello repellere, to repel. If you remember pello pellere before, to strike or drive, here, well, this is to strike or drive back, or to like drive off. So if you push something away, you drive it away somewhat violently, then you repel it. So repel, obviously, and a word that is good if you want to talk about someone you dislike, you might call them repellent, because they tend to repel you. Such a repellent person, can't stand to be in his presence. Something like that. It's a more sophisticated way of expressing your scorn. Then we have circumvenio, circumvenire. Notice this long I here, so we're in fourth conjugation land. And this is to surround. Remember, venio, venire is to come or arrive, and circa means around, so you come around something or you surround it. And in English, you can circumvent people, get around them. You can use it in English, though, more to like get around in the sense of get past. You don't usually circumvent someone if you are surrounding them. So here the meaning has changed a little bit, but you still see where it comes from. Now we have two irregular verbs that if we were spending more time in class, we would be drilling and practicing with a lot, but you just want to see these on their own. These are irregulars, and you'll just want to consult this chart. They're only going to pop up a couple times in the reading, so not a really big deal. So we have volo vele, which is to wish or be willing. We also have, you can use it for want as well, though our book tends to use cupio cupere for that. And this is related to the English word volition. Your volition is what you want to do, your willingness to do a thing. And nolo is basically the opposite of that. So this fun little irregular verb, it goes volo for I want, or I wish, or am willing. If you wish, it's vis. He, she, or it wishes, volt. If we wish volumus, you all wish voltus and volunt there, for they wish. Now, the opposite of this is to not want, to be unwilling. So nolo is I don't want. Non vis, you have two words here, and non volt. You just put a non in front of it. But then we get to we don't want, nolumus, you all don't want, non voltus, and they don't want, nolunt. So here you can kind of remember this is, well, if it has an O in it, then you replace, as the second letter, then you replace the V with an N. Otherwise, you put a non in front of it. Now, if you tell someone not to do something, you use the negative form of the imperative here. So in Latin, you'll say literally like, don't be willing or be unwilling to do a thing. So noli me tangere would mean be unwilling to touch me or don't touch me. If you tell multiple people, you would say nolite. Now we have a couple little adverbs here. So we have haud, which is not, scarcely, or barely. You have postridie, which is the next day or on the next day. Procul is far away. And quomodo is how, literally in what way. So a modus is a method, a way of doing a thing. Think about a criminal might have an MO, which stands for modus operandi, the way of doing, of operating. And quomodo is in what way. These don't have a ton of good English derivatives here. But then we go up here, we have some nouns. Well, a toga is obviously a toga. This is sort of like the Roman equivalent of a business suit. It is fancy, it is, well, not exactly fancy, but it is, and it's how it's made, it's a very long strip of cloth. But it is your sort of fanciest clothes that you would wear, most formal, let's say. And it is difficult to do much of anything in. Like most sort of formal clothes, it is displaying that you can own a lot of fabric, and it also is something that you can't work in because, well, if you're wearing a toga, your left arm is covered. You can't really move both arms equally, and it's difficult to work in. That is actually the point. Most fancy clothes that people wear tend to immobilize them to sort of show off the fact that they aren't working. Like, hey, look at me, I can't do manual labor. So then we have auxilium auxilii, which is help. So if something is auxiliary, it is the sort of helping thing. It could be like, if you're into science fiction, you might have like an auxiliary, or just the space shuttle. Miss the space shuttle. It would have like the auxiliary power unit, right? So if the main power goes out, the auxiliary power comes on. It's helping out. You also have helping troops if you recruit them from, let's say, other people around you. You would call them auxiliaries. They're not your main army, but they're the helping troops that you sort of bring in. Not that they often have much choice. So then we have a proilium. Proilii is a battle. No particularly helpful English words here. But now this next one, civis. Civis, this is a third declension noun, and this one is really important because this is a citizen. And so people will try to make this civil sometimes, which comes from this, but that would actually come from the third declension adjective, civilis, civile, which means relating to citizens. So a civil war now is a war between citizens. And everything that comes from, that has this CIV in it, has to do with citizens in some way or another. But remember that this most basic form is just citizen. In Latin, you could also have civitas, civitatis, which is citizenship, or it can refer to the entire state, like the thing made up of all of the citizens. And yeah, in English, we'll use the word civil to refer to anything that has to do with citizens. If you behave in a civil way, that also means you're being polite. You're behaving like a good fellow citizen. Civil law is the law that, is between citizens. Like you take someone to court. It's not that the government is charging you with a crime. That would be criminal law. But civil law is between citizens. Civics is how citizens, govern, run the government, all of those sorts of things. So this has a lot of stuff in English, but you want to just stick to this word, just citizen, all on its own when you see this in the Latin, because it's easy to take this word and take it too far. Then we have consul, consulis. This is the Roman equivalent of a president, except they have two of them. The Romans, after they drive out the kings, are really afraid of one person abusing power, and so they'll have two consuls, but it's sort of like co-presidents. The idea is that if they don't agree, then, well, nothing happens, and that's better than someone using their power too much, taking over the state, becoming a tyrant. But if you have an emergency and two people who disagree might be a problem, the Romans can appoint a dictator. This is a legal office. This is not something where you just have one person who seizes power or is illegitimate, like we tend to say, oh, a dictator is someone who is just taken over the government of a place and is telling people what to do. Well, for the Romans, it is a temporary appointment. The Senate actually appoints a dictator. It's limited to 6 months, and the dictator does get to do pretty much whatever they want to solve a particular crisis, but their power is limited to dealing with that crisis as well. It's only when you get to Julius Caesar, who makes himself dictator for life, that this goes completely off the rails. We have a neuter plural here, moinia, moinium, for the walls. These are city walls here. You wouldn't use this to refer to the walls of your house. This is like fortification walls. Nothing great in English with that. Then we have this weird fourth declension noun. Don't worry about this. This is something that you'll see if you continue on into Latin too. You're going to really see it in the accusative, which is going to look entirely normal, like a second declension noun. So when you see this in the reading, when you see it pop up, just pretend it's second declension. Obviously, our word senate comes from this. Senate is, in fact, a group of old men. If you remember, I think we've had the word senex, senes, for an old man before. If you are senile, you are confused, like an old man. The Senate is the group of old men that advises. Then we have pauper pauperis, an adjective, which means poor. In English, the word pauper comes straight into this. You might have heard the story of the prince and the pauper. And that is just a poor person. And our English word poverty, if you think about it, well, you got some of the same things, particularly since this U looks suspiciously like a V, but it has obviously changed a lot. So it's related. This is kind of the source of it, but it goes through a lot of changes. Ipse ipsa ipsum is himself, herself, or itself in the sense of like, oh, I myself am doing this thing, or you yourselves should take care of that. I'm not helping you. And I gave you a note where this pops up in the reading, so don't worry about that too much. We've had, of course, hikai kok last week, so we're going to see this a little bit. We also have two prepositions. Trans is across, and you can think of probably a happy 100 words in English that have trans in them. If I transfer something, I carry it across. If I transport, I also carry it across. Translate means the same thing, actually, just used in a different context. If I transfigure something, I change it across from one thing to another. There are a ton of these. Then, de plus the ablative. We've seen this a few times, but just as a reminder, it can mean about. I can talk about a thing. Or you can go down from a thing too. If I come down from like the hill, then I would be going, de colle, down from. And we have descend and all sorts of things in English like that. You can also use et. Now, et can be and, but you don't say and this and that. But you can say both this and that. It's a fun little pattern that Latin uses. So those are some of the new words that are going to pop up in this reading, and look out for them. Have this file, which is in the vocab section on the Google Classroom, perhaps by your side as you are looking through the reading.